My daughter-in-law slid a paper across the counter and said, "You have 30 days to vacate." 2 mornings later, the title officer asked one question. "Who's the beneficiary on the transfer on death deed?" I said my name. The room went quiet the way justice does when it doesn't need applause. People think a house is made of wood and nails. My house is made of Saturdays, of nail holes from pictures we still talk about, of mornings where coffee behaves and the news minds its manners. My name is Martha Hale. I am 78 years old, slow to anger and quicker to soup. I have a soft cardigan that knows where my shoulders go when worry arrives. My husband Grant used to say our porch light worked better than a doorbell because it told people we were home before they knocked. Grant died 2 years ago, tidy to the last, like a man leaving a workbench ready for the next shift. He left notes on the furnace filter, change it when you sneeze at dust, on the water heater, listen for a new hum, and on a folder labeled House, Title and Deeds. He knew I respected paper. He knew it respects me back. My son Luke carries his father's eyebrows and sometimes none of his patience. He married Brittany, who is clever with calendars and less talented with forgiveness. She manages people in a way that makes them feel managed, which I suppose is technically her job. They have a son, Evan, who is 21, with knees that can still figure out where a basketball is going before the ball does. I love all 3. Loving people does not mean letting them redecorate your dignity. After the funeral, my house filled with hands, some helpful, some hungry. Brittany took over the kitchen the way generals take over maps. "We'll list in spring," she murmured to Luke, like a woman consulting the tide. "Before the market cools." I stood there with a spoon in my hand and grief in my shoes and thought, she is talking about my home as if it were a couch. I kept quiet a while. Silence is a tool when you are gathering the facts you will need later. I watched Brittany measure curtains with a tape that looked like a threat. I watched Luke install opinions he had borrowed. I watched Evan stand in the hallway, noticing more than he wanted to. Then came the paper. Brittany printed it off a website whose name sounded expensive and whose advice was cheaper than it looked. Notice to vacate. 30 days. She slid it across my counter with the confidence of a person who had never met a county clerk. "It'll be smoother if you move to assisted living before we list," she said, like weather scheduling a storm at my convenience. I folded the paper twice, not because I agreed, but because I like my counters neat. "Brittany," I said, "you have brought a notice from the internet into a home where the county recorder has already been." Her smile said cute, the way adults say it to kids right before they ruin their day. "Mom, we'll handle it," Luke said, soothing as a sedative. "It's just the will." "The will cannot carry what the deed already carried away," I said. But I did not explain. Not yet. People who are very sure of themselves struggle to hear while they are still talking. That night I climbed the little step stool Grant used to tease me about and fetched the black folder from the top shelf. Inside were the grant deed, the property, tax receipts rubber-banded like a humble bouquet, and a paper with a heading that still looks like a spell to me. Transfer on death, beneficiary deed. In some states, they call it a beneficiary deed. The point is the same. When the owner dies, the house transfers to the person named on the deed without probate, after you file a simple affidavit and a death certificate. Grant had recorded it 5 years ago. Beneficiary. Martha Hale. I remember the day he did it. We had gone to the county recorder to fix a boundary line mistake the tax map kept insisting on. Grant paid the fee and flirted with me in the hallway like the building was a photo booth. On the way out, he patted the folder and said, "When I go first, I want your path to be made of paper. You can walk without tripping. We stopped for pie because that is what the living do when they have just done something sensible about the dying." 2 mornings after Brittany's paper slid into my kitchen like a cardboard storm, I took Grant's folder and my coffee mug and took the 9:40 bus to the county recorder. Mr. Patel works behind glass window number 2, where courage goes to be notarized. He greeted me like a returning library book. I handed him the death certificate. "And our transfer on death deed." He checked the instrument number and nodded. "Recorded," he said, the way doctors say breathing. "You'll need an affidavit of death and a change in vesting. We'll stamp. Title will follow." "Does the will touch this?" I asked. "Not if the beneficiary deed was recorded properly," he said. "This controls the house. The will can be busy with everything else." I walked out with a copy stamped in red that said something sweeter than most love letters. "Received and recorded." Paper has its own romance. Brittany was in my kitchen when I got home, wearing a scrunchie that had strong opinions and a face that wanted to hold a meeting. "The agent is coming at 4, she said. "We should discuss price." "We should discuss ownership," I said. Luke arrived, cheeks flushed the way they get when he's been coached too hard by a woman with a spreadsheet. He sat at the table like a man preparing to apologize to someone other than the correct person. "Mom," he said, "we can get you a nice place with a shuttle and activities. You'll love it." "I love my home," I said. "And Grant loved me in it enough to make sure I own it without a scavenger hunt. There's a transfer on death deed naming me as beneficiary. It is recorded. The title is mine." They both stared at me like I had spoken a language only paper speaks. Brittany recovered first. "Those things can be contested," she said, confidently wrong. "We'll have the will handled by my cousin's attorney. He'll straighten it out." "The will is not a mop," I said. "It cannot clean up what title doesn't spill." Luke's mouth opened, closed, then tried something softer. "Mom, we're not the bad guys." "There are no villains in this story," I said. "Just rules and habits and a woman who likes her own bed." The agent came anyway at 4, a nice man whose suit was more optimistic than the day. He took careful steps through my living room, as if it might throw a tantrum. He made soothing noises about the market and inventory and homes like this. I let him talk, because I have always thought everyone deserves a minute to say the wrong thing before they are given the right paper. "Title company will need seller's signatures, a preliminary report, all the usual," he said. "Title company will need the trustee or beneficiary consent if the house is in a trust or has a TO'd," I said. "In this case, they will need mine." Brittany made a sound that, if it were a color, would have been a very tart pink. "We'll see about that," she said, like a person challenging gravity. "Do," I said. "They're open weekdays." We went to the title office the next morning. It was a room that smelled like printer-warm and coffee honest. Miss Vega sat behind a desk with a haircut that got to the point. She opened a file, searched the county records faster than I could remember my own middle name, and turned the screen slightly so the light touched the truth. "There it is," she said. Transfer on death. Beneficiary. Deed. Recorded 5 years ago. Beneficiary. Martha Hale. She clicked again. To sell, we'd need Miss Hale's consent and an affidavit of death. Without those, our underwriter won't insure the sale. Brittany leaned forward, the way people do when they want proximity to substitute for authority. But the will does many things, Ms. Vega said kindly. But it does not redirect a recorded beneficiary deed. The house passes to the named person upon death. Once we file the affidavit, it bypasses probate. Luke said nothing. The chair under him squeaked quietly, like a small conscience. On the way out, Brittany whispered the thing people whisper when they are not used, to paper outranking their personality. This isn't fair. What would be fair, I said, is my husband coming back. Short of that, clarity will do. The agent stopped calling. The calendar Brittany pinned to my corkboard lost some of its nerve. Luke avoided my eyes for 2 days, then came by with Evan, who hugged me like a person who has learned that some hugs are also apologies. We had soup, because soup makes people forget to be foolish. Brittany did not come, which is its own kind of good manners when you are not ready to keep the rest. There was still the matter of boundaries, which paper can support, but not deliver to your door. I met with Mr. Chen, a lawyer who writes sentences that behave. He helped me file the affidavit of death and the change in vesting, so the county and title would read my name without looking for anyone else's. He also drafted a letter I could keep near the door for future attempts. This property is titled, Per Recorded Beneficiary Deed to Martha Hale. No showings will be permitted. Kindly direct future inquiries to title officer or attorney. It is remarkable how a polite letter can keep your blood pressure in a better neighborhood. A week later, Brittany brought a fresh plan to the kitchen, renting the house to cover expenses while I lived in a studio across town. We'll put your things in storage, she said, bagging up my life into a word that smells like mothballs. Storage is for extras, I said. I am not an extra. I am the primary. Luke, to his credit, had learned something. Britt, he said, gently. The deed is what it is. She stared at him like a coach discovering a new play she had not diagrammed. So we just let her stay? I looked at her. You let me. Brittany, I pay the taxes. I change the filters. I keep the porch light honest. If by let you mean visit, then yes, you may, under rules. And there we were at the thing I had been avoiding. Writing the rules, out loud. Grant and I were married for 52 years. We learned that a home runs on polite sentences you are brave enough to make permanent. I will not be moved, I said. I will be assisted. There is a difference. You may help me with groceries and appointments and leaves if the rake keeps complaining. You may not suggest assisted living like a prize on a game show. You may come for dinner on Thursdays and bring Evan when he remembers how much he likes bread. You may not bring realtors. If you forget, you will be reminded once. After that, the porch light will be off for a while. Brittany looked stunned, then thoughtful, then something softer than either. Luke nodded, relieved that the world had edges again. Evan stole a roll and kissed my cheek. I slept that night with the black folder under my pillow, not because I needed it there, but because sometimes we are allowed to tuck our proof in like a teddy bear. People ask me later if there was a will reading. There was, because paper likes It's day in the sunlight. It took place at Mr. Chen's office where the lamps behave, and the carpet knows how to hush a footstep. He read bequests that made sense and a few that needed a little charity. When it was over, Brittany cleared her throat to request, one last time, an explanation for why the house refused to behave like a bullet point. Mr. Chen folded his hands. Where a transfer on death deed is recorded, the house passes by that document upon death, subject to filing proof of death, and does not enter probate, he said. The will has a lot to say about other things. The deed had the last word about this. She nodded because even people who don't like answers sometimes recognize one when it sits properly in a chair. There are people who hear this story and want more fireworks. They want someone to be dragged or shamed. I am not built for that. Sport. I prefer maintenance to revenge. So I maintained. I took Evan grocery shopping on Saturdays and taught him the aisle where sales and nutrients meet politely. I had Rosa from next door in for coffee and a little mutual gossip about tomatoes, which is the only safe kind. I joined the neighborhood board and suggested we put a bench under the maple, where walkers decided to pretend they didn't need to. Stop. We called it Grant's Bench, and it felt like a new kind of deed. Brittany kept a distance for a while. Distance is just proximity wearing a coat. She showed up again in autumn, damp with apology. I was afraid, she said. A sentence people rarely risk because it sounds like a confession. After Grant died, I felt the math of everything and tried to fix it with control. Control is a loud band-aid, I said. It keeps falling off in public. She laughed, which is how you know a person is still accessible by road. Teach me the filters, she asked. I never watched Grant do them. So I did. We wrote dates in Sharpie on the metal edge the way Grant taught me and taped a little calendar to the furnace door. We changed the water in the humidifier tray and both made faces at what we found there. We looked like two women who had decided to behave like relatives instead of adversaries. Later at Thanksgiving, I put an envelope by each plate. Inside was a photocopy of the beneficiary deed with my SSN blacked out and an explanation in plain words. This is how your grandfather loved me on paper so that love could continue when his hands weren't around to help. If you love someone, write it down in a way the county understands. Evan read his twice and asked for a highlighter, which is how you recognize a good man in training. Not every day was a parade. One afternoon, a We Buy Houses postcard arrived in my mail, with bubbles telling me how easy my future could be if I signed away my past. I tore it in half and used the back as a grocery list. The roof decided to complain during a rainstorm in March. I called 3 roofers and chose the one who didn't try to turn my age into a coupon for his attitude. Brittany offered to split the bill. I let her pay 1/3, the piece labeled Relationship Repair, which is a line item in most budgets, if you're honest. We started porch Thursdays again, the old neighborhood habit Grant and I had before the world got good at retreating indoors. I made bean soup and cornbread. Rosa brought salad that tasted like a memory of summer. Evan brought friends who were all elbows and respect. We put a little sign on Grant's bench that said, "Sit, your day will wait." People did. Days obeyed. On the anniversary of the day Brittany brought the internet to my counter, she came over with a bundt cake and sincerity. "I'm sorry," she said. "I tried to move you like furniture." "I know," I said. "I have been furniture in other people's houses. The trick is growing legs." She laughed and cried at the same time. which is a miracle I have never seen a spreadsheet perform. Do you want the law again? Clean as a countertop? Here it is, in Grandma language. A will is a kind aunt. She helps distribute what's left after. The court has its say. A dedicated title tool, like a transfer on death deed, or a trust, or joint tenancy with right of survivorship, is a bus with a destination printed on the front. The house gets on that bus unless someone burned the bus. Schedule. The county recorder is a librarian for your land. If you want your book to be in the right section, file it there while the author is still taking edits. Homestead rights, in many places, are a raincoat for the surviving spouse. Nice to have even when the sun is out. When people now ask me for advice, I don't hand them revenge. I hand them a clipboard. Paper before panic, I tell them. County before cousin, I add. Soup before speeches, I insist. If you're listening and someone has put a timer on your dignity, here is what I want for you. Go find your folder. If you don't have one, start it. Title at the top, home, title and deeds. Call the county. Recorder. Ask if your state recognizes transfer on death deeds. Ask how to record one correctly. If someone waves a will at you like a flag, smile and ask, "What does the deed say?" Invite the calmest person you know over for soup and ask them to listen while you read your papers out loud. This will solve half of it. The rest will feel solvable. Last week, Evan came by with a woman whose eyes were kind and whose shoes were sensible. They stood on my porch like young people quietly testing the category future. "Grandma," he said, when you decide the house is too much, I'd be honored to be the one who keeps it the way Grandpa did. When, not if. I like this boy. We'll talk when the bench tells me it's time, I said. Not before. He nodded. Brittany leaned against the doorframe, shameless with gratitude that we had learned how to be a family without pretending to be a brochure. Luke fixed the porch light without being asked, which is love in our language. As the sun slid behind the maple, I took the black folder out just to touch the spine. I set it on the table beside bowls that still smelled like cumin and good choices. I thought about Grant in the recorder's office years ago, making our future legal so grief would not get to be the boss. If anyone ever tells you again, 30 days to vacate, tell them your county already decided otherwise on a Tuesday you can prove. Then ladle them a bowl. They may be hungry for information. They may simply be hungry. Either way, a home is at its best when it feeds people. Martha, Haley,